Hey everyone, welcome back to Make It Happen Mondays, where we talk about sales, business, entrepreneurship, personal growth, mental health, and everything in between with guests who I truly respect and I think make a positive impact on the world around us. And I have back with us one of my favorite guests and favorite people in general, Melanie Fellay. She's the CEO and founder of Spekit. It's one of the most innovative, just-in-time learning platforms on the market right now, really taking enablement to the next level. And she was also 30 under 30 in Forbes and spoken at tons of conferences and just an overall great person. And Melanie and I, every time I have a conversation with her, not only do I learn something new, but I just feel much better walking away from it. And we both went through some stuff over the past couple of years. We met at Dreamforce, I think it was about a year or two ago, where we talked about some of the struggles both of us were going through from a business standpoint. And I don't want to say it was a low point, but it was one of the low points for both of us. And now we're both back on the other side of this one and are super optimistic about what the future holds for both of us. And so we talked this time about really feeling pride in doing your work again and getting back to loving what you do versus feeling like you work for your own company. I mean, we both have companies that we own and run. Ours is obviously a lot bigger than mine. But the whole point of entrepreneurship is that you can go chart your own course. But when you feel like you're working for your own company, it's actually worst case scenario, right? Because you don't get any of the benefits, you get all the stress, and you don't get the benefits of actually running your own company. So we talked about that and how hiring is everything these days, and trust is everything. Both of us have trusted some people that we probably shouldn't have, and put us in some difficult spots. And so really, but when you find that person that you can trust, it changes everything. And it did for her business and it did for mine as well. Some of the other things I was curious with her about, and her growth, is how you know when to pivot versus keep grinding, right? Because there's sometimes where you just got to get through that grind. But there's other times where you're just grinding and it's actually not the right direction. So when you pivot, also, how do you know that you're the one, right? A lot of people talk about stages of a business and how certain people are really good at certain stages. And then they reach a point where their just skill set isn't there yet. And so how do you know that versus how do you grow and learn about taking that next stage? A lot of things we talked about here, including skills, information overload, learning agility, and really what the future is going to look like for the sales rep and what those skills are going to be necessary. So packed with great information, awesome conversation as usual. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Let's make it happen. Melanie, welcome back to the Make It Happen Monday podcast. How are you?
I am great. Thanks so much for having me. Is this our third or fourth time?
Well, I think third and a half, probably.
Third and a half. Okay.
I think, yes. I think probably fourth total. But yeah, it's and it's always a blast. These are always, there's some interviews and conversations that I have that I really need to make sure that I'm like, all right, I need to prep for this person. I need to know all that other stuff. And my conversations with you are always so natural. Not that I don't prep. I do prep. I do tons of background, but it's always awesome to talk to you. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Love it. Me too.
So I don't think we need to give your background. Usually I say, okay, your origin story, but we've had enough conversations where I think people need to just go do some homework on you. But one of the things that I really wanted to get your perspective on, because you're at a different level than I am when it comes to, companies and funding and growing things, right? I'm back to being a solopreneur, right? And I've never had shitloads of funding, but you've rode this wave now. Of getting a ton of money when times are great, and then all of a sudden and being on a rocket ship, right, when money was free basically, and grow at all costs, and then just having it kicked right in the teeth in a couple of different ways, but more specifically a couple of years ago. And I remember, was it 2 or 3 years ago when we were at Dreamforce, when you were just, we kind of grabbed that drink and both of us were just like stressed out of our minds, but I forget, was it before things fell apart, right?
I think it was probably 2 years ago. Well, we've caught up every Dreamforce. It was 2 years ago, would have been September 2022. And so that was after we had to do our first layoff. And so I can definitely talk through all that. And that was one of the most painful seasons of my life, period. And then last year we caught up right as things were still challenging, but turning the corner. So both times was feeling stressed, very different than today, actually. So, and I'm more than happy. I think it's important that founders, that CEOs, that everyone gets real about kind of the journey that a company goes through. And I think, for anyone listening, like I never thought I was going to start a company, right? When I was 25, I came across a problem that I couldn't shake. And had I known what things would have been like, hey, you're going to get hit with a global pandemic, then you're going to, have to move everyone to remote the day after you move into your office. And then, oh, by the way, the economy is going to, change overnight and half your customer base is going to be doing layoffs, which impact you. So I think had I known all that stuff, who knows, maybe I would have second guessed it. But at the end of the day, I think it's important that we talk about it, so that, employees can understand, reps can understand, that we see how hard it is for them out there too, selling in an environment that still hasn't fully turned the corner, though that was starting to get better. So happy to share.
Well, and it's also just, perception and reality in a lot of ways, right? I think it's funny, I forget who said it. It's like, what advice do you give to entrepreneurs, who want to get into this, and it's, don't do it. You know what I mean? Because to your point, if you knew all this shit,
I think that was the CEO of NVIDIA, funny enough. He's running the most,
yes, it was
valuable company on the planet.
Yeah, you got to be batshit crazy to do this. But for some context, right? So, and I think this is where you and I connected early, which was, the whole concept of just-in-time learning, right? That was that itch that you couldn't scratch, right? Where you just were like, why is it that I have to go learn something and then a month later try to remember and try to use it in line? So walk us through kind of your original vision, and then, quickly kind of to the point where you got funding and everything was going great, and your perception of things, but then the reality of what happened to us in that September and where you started to, right? And then we'll take it from there as far as the decisions that you made and how you shifted things. And then we're going to get to how this relates to sales reps going through similar challenges right now. But I'd love to just get some context for the audience here.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll try and make this the background story short. But in short, I started the company Spekit really born out of my own frustrations trying to support our teams at my last company, which was just new products were launching constantly. We were having systems changes constantly. We rolled out Salesforce. It was a disaster. We were rolling out new tools every other day. We were onboarding people, and it was just a mess, right? We had some documentation in 5 different places, be it Confluence or Google Drive. If the answer existed, it was probably out of date. Meanwhile, our reps were getting their, hand dealt to them on calls with competitive objections and questions. And it was just really difficult to try and make sure that our reps just knew what they needed to know. And I was like, okay, there's got to be a better solution, And so at the time, I'm sure I Googled something like, employee, performance, magic bullet, or whatever it is. And, pretty quickly, the answer was, well, you need an LMS, and you need a CMS, and you need a digital adoption platform, and you need a knowledge management solution. And I was like, hold on, this is just insane. I just want to be able to meet my reps where they are selling, right? Whether that's in Gong, in Salesforce, in Outreach, LinkedIn, with the exact information they need in that moment. Whether that's, I'm actually learning to, let's say, do my account research, hey, how do I actually go about that process? Where do I go? What does good account research look like? To, hey, I just got off this call. I know I'm competing against this competitor. I'm trying to find the perfect case study to share because I know that one exists, but I don't even know what I'm looking for. Boom, how could I get that content recommended to me right when I need it so that I could share it with my buyer? And the whole idea was that it would almost feel like this enablement assistant that's really personalized to you and your needs in the moment so that you could feel confident as you went about your workflow. And so the long story short is that we initially went to market. So I left my job, took the leap. We initially decided not to raise venture capital because I'd worked at a company that had raised a lot of capital, really great team, amazing product, but ultimately they hadn't found at the time they needed to raise a Series D, a path to profitability. And so they couldn't get funding. And I saw the messiness of that as a company, and just saw some bad actors on the VC side. The CEO got replaced. And I was like, we're going to do it differently. My co-founder is amazing. We're like, we're going to raise some friends and family money and just kind of do it our own way. And so we went that way for the first year and a half. And pretty quickly it became clear that just the cost to play the game, meaning the cost to attempt and have a booth at a conference, 9 months before you see the return on it, the cost to do any sort of paid ads, the cost to hire any sort of a team was virtually going to be impossible with the kind of platform and experience we wanted to build and the kind of talent that we needed to attract. And so decided to raise capital basically in 2019. So we already had like 30 customers at the time, kind of initial use cases. We really went to market initially with like a Salesforce adoption use case because that was the one that I'd felt the pain the most on the kind of round-up side. And it was like, hey, we embed anything you need to know as a rep inside of Salesforce so that you can navigate before expanding out. And so we got really lucky with the seed investor that we brought on. Brett Cleaner was our lead investor. He'd worked for Mark Benioff for like 12 years. He knew what great looked like as a company in terms of both, bringing a category to market, right? The whole no software marketing campaign Salesforce did, but also like the operational excellence that was required to get there. Mark Benioff, I think, still reviews like every product that goes to market. And we got really lucky with a few angel investors. So that's kind of where we started. And then pretty quickly, we saw some good traction. Now, I will say in the first, year and a half where we had like $50,000 in the bank, $100,000 in the bank, we were ruthless when it came to our cash management. Like, everyone was wearing a million hats and like we were really racing as if like, there was no tomorrow. Because to a certain degree, like if we couldn't prove out and get that next check, there wasn't. So we raised our seed. We're still very, efficient just because, when you've only got $2 million in the bank, well, that seems like a lot, with salaries and rising cost of living, et cetera, not a whole lot. And we started really seeing a certain velocity there, right? As everyone went remote, now teams needed a better way to train their reps. And it's like, hey, I can't just turn to my rep on the side. You need to empower all these reps that are sitting at home, excited to start new jobs and like basically left on their own to figure things out. And I was like, well, this is a perfect fit, right? Let's meet them inside of their tools and have this like guided experience. And the market thought so too. So we had a lot of success kind of selling this like tool adoption, training, process guidance use case. And at the time, I didn't fully appreciate that we were in like, the best market we'd ever seen, right? Hadn't been selling that long. So it was a full air.
You and I both. I was like,
oh my gosh, like people just, love this, need this, is best thing ever. And we had a lot of growth. We grew quickly on all fronts, including the team. Can definitely talk about some of the learnings I've had there. And we eventually raised a Series B in December 2021, which looking back was pretty much at the peak of the venture capital market in terms of like valuation prices. And, none of our raises were easy per se, because, at the end of the day, I had to defend to anyone interested, like, why were we going to be able to disrupt an industry where there's literally hundreds of solutions across LMSs and CMSs and whatever. But I knew that there was just a better way, a better experience for reps. And so we closed, $45 million. So at that point, we'd raised about $60 million in December 2021. And that's when we really went on a hiring spree because, in this model that we're all on, especially kind of like the venture-backed rat race or so at the time, you're setting these really ambitious goals. Now you're basing them off of your, quota attainment and your retention rates. And at the time we had like world-class rates across the board. And, when you're trying to triple from, 5, 6 to 18, 20 in a year, like you need to hire the rep capacity for it. And so we hired lots of engineers, lots of reps. We built out a partner team. I mean, we were really entering like, okay, it's time to like scale. And come basically May or June that year. So just a few months later, after we'd gotten all these plans approved and everyone was on board, we started seeing like the first early warning signs. And in fact, one of our investors, Kraft, they posted a memo. It was about burn rate, but they saw it early on. They were kind of like starting to get that message out in the marketplace. And it became clear that, winter was coming. Now, I thought winter was coming meant like, oh, we're going to, grow 20% less faster than we thought we would. I don't think anyone looking back was going to be able to predict just how significantly the market was going to shift. But when you saw, valuations in the public markets and private markets, dropping by anywhere between 50 to 90%, right? All of a sudden, it just became very clear that like the pace at which we were spending money relative to now the expectations from revenue growth that we needed to hit to be able to like not even just grow and exceed, but maintain the valuation that we had to make our investors right. Plus just give us the time to really get this business right no longer was on the same time horizon that we'd planned the business. And I take responsibility for that. At the end of the day, like looking back, hindsight's 2020, but I would have done things differently. I would have been more intentional even from the get-go. I think we still hired too fast, as many companies did. But
how do you though? So yes, and right, like how do you? I mean, obviously hindsight's 2020 and everything, right? But in that moment, everybody was doing that. You know what I mean? So for you to slow growth, for instance, for you to take a step back, for you to not hire as fast as you would have gotten slaughtered by your investors. You would have gotten, so I guess what's your learning lesson of the relationship, I guess, you have with the investors and the market when, when I guess we all had blinders on? Was there any learning lesson for you in that regard that would have kind of woken you up? Because I said the same thing, like I'm not an econ major, but to me, like the fact that I didn't understand fundamentally the impact interest rates were going to have on the market, I was really disappointed in myself, quite frankly, because I was on the train like everybody else. I was up to the right. Oh my God, let's hire people. This is fucking awesome. Let's go. And I was not operationally efficient. I did not, cross the T's and dot the I's and do the stuff that I usually do as a solopreneur who's very frugal with the money that I spend. But I just wonder, like, would there have been a circumstance where I would have been like, you know what, let everybody else go crazy here and hire. I'm just going to stay methodical here and do things the quote unquote right way. Like, would you have been able to slow down even if you saw it?
I don't know if I have a great answer to that. What I'll start by saying is I've never wanted to be like everybody else. So there's a part of me that's like, I took a lot of pride. Like I was so proud early on that like I had no sales background, like no traditional B2B SaaS. And before hiring our first reps and hiring just a VP, like many founders do, I was like, no, I'm going to learn how to sell. I mean, that's literally how you and I got connected. Like I went looking for sales training, came across your podcast and like listened to it religiously for like my first year before I knew you, and like learned to master discovery. I took your course. Like I was like, I'm going to learn how to sell. Now, a lot of founders out there don't do that. They're just like, I'm going to hire a phenomenal VP of sales and sell, just like marketing. Before I hired out, like I built our own website and sell. I'll say, I remember what it felt like to take a lot of pride in like actually doing the work myself and also like modeling that for the team. And so, and when I look back, I think part of the reason why I had some level of dissatisfaction, in my role of just CEO overseeing things is that I wasn't doing the work. I wasn't doing the things that I loved anymore. And so I'll say that like, if I really look back at like how I was running the company and, what I was tolerating, what I was approving, the plans that I was, getting behind, I think that there's the part of me that isn't necessarily as likable by everyone else because I'm up in everyone's business. I'm paying attention to the details. I'm reviewing calls. I'm in deals that I kind of let go of. And I think had I like stayed more true to myself and how I naturally operate, I think I could have ran the company a bit differently. I think what was happening at the same time, and you and I have talked a little bit differently, is while these interest rates and everything was happening, there was also a really interesting market dynamic, around, there was this employee scarcity. And so like every company was, rolling out more and more benefits and like more things to be like perceived as like the best place to work in the world, where, there was this whole idea that like, well, we don't want the founder in our business. I want to run my sales process the way I want to run my sales process. And so there was this interesting dynamic just like in the hiring market where you were hiring this, cohort, I'd say, of employees that, were ready to join the rocket ship, but that also really wanted to feel empowered in the, I don't want anyone in my business, versus empowered in like, hey, I'm going to make sure you have the context you have, and I'm going to empower you to make decisions, but I'm going to inspect the quality and the details of everything that goes. And so I think that's probably something in hindsight that I spent a lot of time thinking about, like, was like, where did I kind of like lose my natural sense of operating? And I think over the last 2 years, I've definitely leaned back into that. I think in terms of just like the business plans and revenue, like I think if you really double clicked on the metrics, I think there was a lot of assumptions that were all modeled off of best case, and companies felt comfortable doing that because everyone was doing it versus are we being conservative? And I think at the end of the day as a CEO, like it's my responsibility to be aggressive and risk taking in terms of like our innovation and products, but rational and more conservative when it comes to like really thinking through the business like fundamentals, our operational efficiency, the team, because at the end of the day, like I make a commitment to the team when they join the company that I'm going to take care of them. And I think that having to do layoffs because of those mistakes is one of the worst, most painful lessons you can learn as a CEO, let alone for the people that felt that on the receiving end, which I still to this day feel guilty about.
That's the same on my end. It's like, the fact that I didn't see it and put us in a position to then have to unfortunately make some bad, or some really hard decisions towards the end of that was just heartbreaking to me in a million different ways. Do you think that you got caught up in the perception of what a CEO should be versus what your reality wanted to be?
100%.
Okay. And so what did you perceive? So let's use that. Like, what was your perception of what a CEO of a funded company should be doing versus who Melanie was?
My entire life. Like I remember like when my dad always tells this story about when I was little and I'd be like, 6 or 7 years old and we'd go to dinners at my friend's house and I'd have like, the young kids that I was their friend's age. And, there was the kids table, the adults table. And by the end of dinner, I would always move from the kids table to the adult table and like join in the conversation, voice my opinion as if like I was, I should be part of that table having conversation. Like I've always held my opinion. Like everyone thought I was going to be a lawyer. Like I've always cared so much. I'm so passionate. I think I'm right about everything. Definitely not. And I care, like I want to know the details. I want to understand the root causes. Like I'm very curious. I want to understand the inner workings and the thinking that went into things. And that is my natural mode of operating. That is just how I am. And if you look at how the company is being run right now, and I like doing the work. Like I actually love working on our narrative, working on our product designs, working with the team. Like I actually like doing the work. Now, I think what happened is, as we scaled the company, et cetera, it's like, well, you can't scale as a CEO if you're doing the work. And there was this whole kind of like almost mindset in management school where it's like, you need to hire great people and trust them to do the thing. There's an element of that that's true. Like I need to hire people that are better than me in every single function. But I think this whole concept of trust is where things went wrong for me. Because, I think I interpreted that as like, I need to just trust that they know what to do and know the best option and have the same level of context that I have or have the level of experience and skill that I assumed they do when we hired them. And that goes at all level, but really ultimately the level I'm the most responsible for is at the top. When at the end of the day, like I don't have 20 years of marketing, but I've thought more about marketing this product than anyone I could possibly hire in our marketing function. And so I do think my opinion counts. Now that might be uncomfortable. And like what I do want to be is I want to be challenged, but I can't be challenged in my thinking unless I'm willing to voice that and it not feel like I'm disrupting or asking. Like I felt like I was all of a sudden asking for permission to be part of certain meetings and to be part of certain initiatives and to review certain things because I was always being this nuisance. And when I look back, I think that at the end of the day, like, I think my job is to be that quality control. And, very simple things. But for example, when there's a day that I woke up and it was really tough because my co-founder had to step away from the business. That was at the same time in 2022. My co-founder had to step away from the business in April 2022. So after we'd raised her Series B, she'd gone through an insurmountable amount of personal trauma in her life. I know and I'm not going to revisit it here, but that was heartbreaking in every way because she's an absolute badass and we built the thing together. But now I was responsible. Like I was basically her CTO for a short period of time until I hired someone new. And that was an incredibly difficult process because we'd scaled really, really quickly, which meant that, I was pushing on growth and innovation a lot, but I wasn't actually looking at like the retention of our usage and features. And so what was happening is that like all of our metrics showed that we were up and to the right. And so I was like, we need to out innovate, we need to push. And what was happening is that we were launching a lot of capabilities that were kind of in like MVP format, like, hey, this is good enough for market, but we weren't going back and revisiting them. So what ends up happening is now you've got this product that has a bunch of good enough features that many of them I haven't fully reviewed, et cetera. And one day I woke up and I'm like, holy crap, like I don't feel the same pride as I felt in the past. Like today I'm sitting in front of you right now. I'm so goddamn proud of the product. Like I'm so fired up when I'm demoing again. Like I love demoing it. I'm so proud of the team. But there was a period of time where that was no longer the case. And, you know, I realized like I'd removed myself from design reviews. I'd removed myself from our support tickets channel. All those pieces were like having the CEO looking over your shoulder felt like, you know, and some of this was in part my own thinking that was flawed. Some of it was getting feedback from team members that I probably shouldn't have listened to, that it's like, well, it's going to intimidate people if you're in the room. You should be intimidated. You should be intimidated about the quality of your work, not intimidated from a personality standpoint. But if you're designing something, if you're bringing something to market, if you're designing it, you should want it to be the absolute best work. And so you should want to present it to someone that's going to, you know, that's going to give you that feedback and challenge you and give you, like, I know I want to, and I've come to appreciate that I want to be surrounded by people who want to do their best work. And I don't think going around and just praising people and giving high fives or not being in the room because if you're there, it's going to intimidate them is the right way to lead. And so I think that's a lot of the shifts we've made. And I think that frankly, I've got a way better rapport and relationship with the majority of the team. There's definitely times where like I challenge teams and I'm harder than they'd probably like me to be. But I do think if you look at the quality of the product 2 years ago versus now, it speaks for itself. And that's what I care about. At the end of the day, I want to have a product experience that's best damn enablement experience on the planet for reps. And the only way you do that is if you hold yourself. I need to hold myself to the highest standard. I need to hold the team to the highest standard. And I have to be in those meetings and in the weeds to be able to do that.
Oh yeah, you said something that hit me, which is a lot, but asking for permission. You felt like you were asking for permission. The same exact thing happened to me. Like I grew my company, I only had 20 people, but there was literally eight of them that really didn't report to me because I wasn't the one that hired them, that type of thing. And anytime I needed something, I honestly felt like I was asking for a favor. Right? Because they were all focused on this. And I was like, hey, could you maybe do, and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm the fucking CEO of this company. Like I'm paying your fucking, you know what I mean? And part of me was like, fuck that. I should be hardcore with this. But I think I did the same thing. I trusted people probably I shouldn't have trusted. I let go of the reins because I love being in the weeds of like doing shit. Like I love creating and I love doing, but I don't love the details of accountability. Like, I know that's my biggest flaw is that like, I'm the guy you want in your forecast review because I'm sitting there, we'll come up with creative shit and all that other stuff. But literally as soon as like you miss your forecast, I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to have this conversation. Like pips literally make my skin crawl. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, ew. Like, can't you just figure this shit out type of thing? You know what I mean? I hire good people. I spend a lot of money. I give you access to me. Let's go. But you bring back to the trust factor, and I have honed in on this, and I realize that at the end of the day, trust is everything, right? Because if
earned.
I don't,
it's everything, and it's earned,
and it can't, and that's the challenge with hiring, right? To your point, I would love to have a bunch of people who challenged me, who got shit done, who had massive work ethic, who were all in, that type of stuff. But it is so fucking hard and rare to find those type of people. And when you make a mistake at that level of bringing somebody in because you might not have had some confidence, for me, like I didn't have a lot of confidence that I was the guy to take us to this level at a certain stage of my career. So it's like, okay, but then that guy, quote unquote, comes in and I'm like, wait a minute, motherfucker doesn't know what they're talking about. You know what I mean? I know more than them. So I guess where for you as you've gone on this journey, how do you know that it's time for you to offload something and find somebody else versus you continuing down the path? Because I talk a lot in the context on this is I talk a lot about stages of growth, right? And my experience is I've seen certain people be awesome at a certain stage of a business's growth, right? 0 to 5 million, everything's chaotic. Who cares? Like there's no process and whatever it is. And then there's like the 5 to 20 million where there's process and there's structure and that. And then there's like the 20 to whatever and then IPO and go from there. And certain people are really good at getting company from stage 1 to stage 2. But there are very few that are great at all the way through. Kyle Porter is one of the perfect examples that I point to. That dude, I mean, first of all, Tog, you hit on just, September of 2021, right? Like he goes on the Mount Rushmore of exits for Sales Loft, right? But he was 0, burned his company to the ground 3 times, then got funding and he was the CEO all the way through it. And he's one of the only ones that I've seen. So I guess from your perspective, how do you know when you've hit a wall that you are not the one to take it to that next level versus just having the confidence in yourself to figure it out?
That's a great question. I actually think I've got a good example of this. I'll say that the more, like we've talked about this on past podcasts, I feel like you and I have this in common, but like taking time to like really reflect and check in with myself is something that I've realized is really, really important to have the kinds of inflections or insights that only you need to come to terms with. No one else can tell you. There's no article you can read online. There's no podcast you can listen to versus asking yourself those deep questions. And I think it really comes down to like how much fun am I having? Like I've just realized like, I love hard work. I love building. I love product. I love marketing. Like I was actually talking to my fiance last night because I was worked late and then we had a quick dinner and frankly, then I took my laptop out of bed and I was recording a demo because I'm so excited about some of the stuff that we're launching. And I was like, I'm sorry. Like, I want to talk. He's like, it's fine. He's like, just admit it. You love it. I'm like, I love it. I'm having so much fun. He's like, you love a lot of your work. He's like, just remember how lucky you are, and it really just struck a chord. I was like, I am lucky to love how much of what I do. And so I know that if I'm not having fun doing something, that it's pretty clear that like, I either need to delegate it or I need to get clear on like why this work doesn't feel fun. And when I look back at last fall, I had a great team, like a lot of talented individuals in a lot of ways, but things just weren't working. Like there was way more politicizing than was necessary. Our culture was at rock bottom. We'd seen improvements in the product. We'd seen improvements in a lot of our metrics, but, things were just not feeling good. And to be completely transparent, like I had questions. I was like, do I not know how to lead this big of a team? Like, do I need to think about a plan B? Like I asked myself those questions because the business deserved it. Our investors deserved it. And, when I kept coming back at it, like I didn't believe that I didn't believe that I could hire anyone else that had as strong as the vision about the product and this space and the amount of passion. Like I was still so excited about this problem and so clear on where we needed to go with the company and the product that I was like, I don't think I can hire someone better than me at that. However, what I'm really struggling with is trying to get alignment between our go-to-market teams, like getting sales and marketing and CS aligned. Like we had, a lot of, I don't even like the word alignment because I think it's completely misused. But anyway, the point is things weren't working. It was very clear whether we wanted to admit it to ourselves or not, that like teams were running in all different directions. Like we were having people issues. Like there was just so many challenges. And instead of looking for a CEO, I started asking myself like, well, what if I looked for a COO? Like, what if I looked to bring on someone that would be solely responsible for managing all of go-to-market? Because I'm not having fun doing this anymore and it's not working. Like it's just not working for me. And I feel like I'm good at marketing branding and ideas. And I've got a lot of ideas that I believe are right, but this just isn't working. And yes, maybe there was a question of like, do we have the right people on the team? That's always something you need to ask. But there's one in time where you also need to do a little bit of self-reflection. It's like, but it didn't work out with the last person either. So is this a factor of me? And I think it was to a certain degree. And so long story short, I ended up deciding to hire a COO, found the most ideal candidate. We are so blessed to have him. It's just been so much fun working with him over the last 9 months. And when he joined, he was like, hey, like I really want to take on people in finance as well, like not just go to market. And at first I was like, I can't let go of, there was times where I was running like 14 people reporting into me. I was like, how can I go from just having a CTO and a COO now, like 2 people reporting to me? And when I really took a step back, I realized like, you know what, maybe it's time that I give away those responsibilities so that I can really focus and take on the projects that I love and the work that I love doing. And I think looking back, it's probably one of the single and like best decisions we've made at a company. Our culture is at an all-time high. We've had a few boomerang employees come back, like our current head of sales, who's just an absolute joy to work with. He came back. You've met him before at Dreamforce. He was with us for 4 years, left, came back. Now is our head of sales. The product's at an all-time best. I've gotten way more time to focus on the product than I ever have the last few years. We're all having fun. So it's been a good decision, but it take me getting to a point of saying like, okay, I need to stop looking outside of me for the problems and start looking inside and realizing that like this wasn't working and like I didn't think I could solve it by myself. So anyway, long-winded answer, but I'd say that's probably what became clear.
And I think that's, it's interesting because I think there's a lot of people right now at a certain inflection point of their careers because it's not fun out there right now, quite frankly. Especially in sales. I mean, there isn't a company that I work with right now that isn't getting their ass handed to them, and therefore the sales reps getting their asses handed to them. And there's a lot of is sales right for me? Is this what should I be doing with my life type of thing? So I think in this time where it's not getting any easier. Any thoughts for the reps out there? Forget about founders here for a second, because I think we all have inferiority complexes. We all have self-reflection that we need to do from a founder standpoint as far as running a business and being responsible for people. But when it comes to what people are going through right now and questioning their careers, questioning their decisions, questioning the companies they work for, where do you start to realize I need to keep grinding through this versus I need to pivot now because I'm not having fun anymore? And one more piece of context to that is my fear is that because we are in such a short-term gratification culture, right? Where it's like, oh, and there's so many different options for me to go. So it's like me putting in the work to get to the level of like, ooh, actually, I like that, right? Because the big question I'm trying to answer right now is, when I'm 48 again, I didn't have a lot of options. Like I had to go to college. Well, I didn't have to, but if I really wanted an opportunity in a job, I had to get a degree. And then I had to start kind of at the bottom. And then I had to grind and get basically treated like shit. And you know what I mean? And make my cold calls and do the grind stuff and then earn the right to the next level. Whereas now, and so now I have a genuine appreciation and I have a foundation to make decisions from, right? Because I put in the hard work. I'm not afraid of hard work and I'm ready to, and I can have some perspective here. Whereas now kids come into and there's so many options. They don't necessarily have to put the grind and the hard work into that we did. And so I think it's confusing a lot of people because they don't have a foundation to build from and make decisions off of, because hard work is punching them right in the face right now. And I'm worried that a lot of them are going to give up because it's hard versus powering through to get to the other side where you are. I know that was a big question, but insights on that?
I love this question. I mean, I think it's really timely. I think a lot of people, to your point, are second guessing. A lot of people are leaving companies hoping that, the grass is greener only to come back. I'm seeing a lot of boomerangs in the marketplace in general. I'm going to answer honestly, and some of these might be hot takes. So the first thing is, if you're not loving your job, find one that's in an office. At the end of the day, I think that sales is one of the absolute hardest jobs out there. It requires time management like you've never seen before. And there's something about being in the pit, surrounded by other people that are doing the work, not just seeing a win on Slack, but actually hearing people high-fiving, that camaraderie that you just cannot replicate at home. And so especially if you're new in sales and you're like, well, I'm not seeing success. I'm not, guess what? You've never had the experience of learning in an environment and feeling what a real sales floor feels like. because I work from home most of the time. I travel all the time for work. And I do it because I love deep work. And there's a lot of work that I need to do in my role to be effective. And I can do a few demos. But if I was in the role that I was when I started Spekit, which was basically sales all day long, and I wasn't able to turn around to the people around me, I cannot imagine. And so I think one, if you want to accelerate your ability to learn and grow, just by osmosis, like literally you don't need to do anything, just being surrounded and hearing other people is going to help you grow faster in the office. And I'm not saying that, hey, you need to commute for an hour. Like, is there a company in the area that you can go work for where you believe enough in the product? Because as John Barrows says, sales is the transfer of enthusiasm that you can find. I think I would just be really honest with yourself, because I think there are so many pros of working from home. I could list them all out. We have that policy. But at the end of the day, I think that if you're really questioning your career, knock off every reason first. And one of them, like, experience what it's like to actually be back on a sales floor with a team, being able to talk to product engineer, you name it. That'd be one. And again, I know that that's a controversial opinion, but that's my honest answer, especially if you're early in your career. 2, really look at the product that you're selling. If you're in this environment, it is so freaking competitive. It is so freaking competitive. If you do not believe wholeheartedly in what you're selling, it's going to come through. It is going to come through so clearly. You're going to have that sales breath. And I think buyers right now, because things are happening so fast around you, they're not just trying to buy into the product you have today. They're trying to understand the vision, where you're going. They want to get behind a product, because the pace of AI, like, your product is going to look and feel different than it does today in 3 months from now, and 6 months from now, and a year from now, at a rate that you can't even possibly imagine. And you're seeing that everyone from like the Salesforces, and I would put now Gong, Outreach, like those bigger platforms, and the rate of their innovation that's dramatically increased, to the smaller startups that are moving quickly. And so, I think you really need to get behind a vision that you're bought into, that you can pitch, because that's what a savvy buyer is doing. So I'd look at the environment that you're in. And of course, that starts with the culture of the company, et cetera. But I would say, to your point, selling is hard in general. Most industries are struggling. Yes, there were 1 or 2 that are doing better than others, but it's more than likely that the next company you go to it's still going to be hard as heck to sell. So can you optimize for your ability to do it better? Can you be in an environment that promotes that? And can you be passionate about the product? And then frankly, do you have a manager, coach, or another option to help you grow and learn? Because I know, at least for myself, when I feel like I'm truly growing and learning, and guess what? That means putting in the work. That means listening to podcasts. That means like doing things that actually help you bring in new tactics, try new things. Like, you need to like keep things spicy. And if you're running the same playbook that you were doing 2 years ago, it's going to get boring. If your talk track isn't naturally evolving, if you aren't trying new discovery questions, if you're not having fun with it, that art of the sale, it's going to get boring. So like, what are you doing to actually get creative with how you're demoing? Try something new. Like, are you putting in that work to make it as fun as possible? So those would be, I think, a few of the places I start, outside of the obvious ones, which is like, do you have a good manager, et cetera.
No, but I think there's almost a perfect storm right now, which I'm, again, kind of layering on top as far as the complexity of what's going on right now, which is we're in a short-term gratification world, right? So work ethic, however you want to talk it. I balance work ethic between options, right? It's like work ethic is go grind but you have a million other options to do things that are easier and faster and cheaper to make money type of thing. So I don't really hate it when people have these side hustles, but it takes away the grit necessary to be successful in business. Then you add on the AI component to this, which is disrupting everything. And the question is, and this kind of leads to where you are with your product and what you're doing right now, which is, what are the skills necessary to be successful in the future? What should we be learning right now? I go back to the fundamentals, but even the fundamentals in a lot of ways, at least what I notice is what I would think is fundamentals might not even be necessary in the future. Quick example, my daughter, when we were thinking about going to private schools and stuff like that, I literally would ask, I'd let my wife and daughter ask whatever questions they wanted to ask in the admissions process. And I had one question and one question only. which is, hey, how are you integrating AI into the learning process? How are you teaching these kids how to leverage AI as part of the learning process? And if their answer was, oh, well, we have a policy against AI, I would literally get up and I would walk out and I would say, thank you very much. My daughter's not coming to this school. And so I question what a kid is going to need to learn to be successful when it's all going to be legitimately at their fingertips. They'll be able to ask any question about history, about equations, about this, about that, and they won't have to actually know it. They'll not have to know what question to ask. So if we bring that into the workforce right now, with all the stuff that you're seeing with AI and the impact that it's having, and how, in my opinion, we are getting squeezed as a sales population because marketing is coming closer and closer and closer to us with all this personalization and relevance and stuff like that. And customers are less and less interested in talking to some sales rep that's just going to drone through a PowerPoint presentation and ban questions because they want more of a PLG motion and they want to talk to customer success or engineer than they do a sales rep because they don't see a lot of value in it. What does a sales rep need to know to be successful in the future?
Loaded question. One that I care deeply about. I think we fill our reps' heads with a lot of unuseful information. And I think AI is almost being born out of necessity. Like, it is virtually impossible for a rep to try and keep track of every new competitor update that product marketing pushes out, every new feature update that your product team is pushing out. When you're seeing, I saw the other day, like Vanta, launched 100 product releases or something last quarter. I know our product channel, we're launching 25 new features per quarter. How can you possibly expect your reps to keep track of that, right? And all your competitors and their features and what's changing there. And oh, by the way, the newest version of messaging, because now that you have this feature, you need to talk about the product differently. Now we're talking about hey, how do we talk about, we don't want to be talking about a chatbot and then a search and then recommendations. It's no, we're just your AI enablement assistant. It's okay, great. Now let's get all of our training. There is just so much, let alone each of those products that you're using, those tools that you're using to do your job. Oh, they're all changing. Now Gone can do this thing and Outreach can do this thing. And oh, now the UI is changed over here and it's way better. And oh, by the way, there's this now Ask Anything. There is so much freaking noise. Mm-hmm. This idea that we're going to get reps that can keep track of it all and master it all is virtually impossible. And that's the entire premise of my vision in terms of the solution, which is you only need to know what you need to know, when and where you need to know it. Meaning that competitor update that came out 2 months ago against that competitor that you never go up against, you don't need to know it 2 months ago. It doesn't freaking matter. It doesn't matter. That course that you're going to be asked to take doesn't freaking matter. It only matters when you're on that call or you're in that deal when that competitor comes up. And you need to be able to handle that in the best way possible, either on that call or on the next call. That is when that information matters to you. So the question is, how can you leverage signals to identify that competitor's in the deal before you know it? And that's where there's a lot of products out there that are doing that promise. Or how do we recommend that competitive battle card and tell you, hey, John, right after you finish that call, your enablement assistant is reviewing that call script and says, hey, John, since you last competed against this competitor that they mentioned on that call, an update came up and you haven't seen it. Here's exactly what you need to know has changed about your knowledge so that you can go into that next call. And in order to go in the next call, here are the couple questions that you might want to prepare and ask. That's how much you need to know about that competitor in that moment, not 2 months ago.
So, okay, but surface level depth. So, okay, I don't need to know it until now, right? And so it pops up in this moment. I have this conversation and I might hopefully be able to, use whatever the information is to address that issue right now. But if I don't know it, how do I have the context on how to use it effectively? right? Because you could give me the best objection technique or whatever it is in the moment when I'm having this conversation. But if I don't fundamentally understand, for instance, why someone's having an objection or where objections come from or those type of things, then I'm going to use the surface level of what this bot AI thing told me, but I'm not going to have the context to be able to really give the depth of an answer that is necessary to somebody who knows what they're talking about.
So going back to what I was saying, I think the problem is that rather than actually focusing on the skills of doing proper discovery, which doesn't matter what competitors in question, doesn't matter what buyers in question, like teaching critical thinking, critical listening skills, critical discovery skills, like that is a skill that no matter what freaking happens in the market, no matter what career you're in, sales, you need it better than anyone else. Those are lifelong skills that you need to know and master regardless of what career you're in. But in sales, it matters more than ever. That's not going away. But I think all the other useless information that gets poured onto you in a day-to-day where you're spending way more time trying to keep up on the hamster wheel rather than getting those key things right is what's holding you back. And so I think that a lot of general kind of knowledge, change management stuff is going to become more what I call just in time. I'm actually skeptical on the whole like real time information. We can talk about that, but I believe that it's more of a distraction for reps. So the question is like, how can you recommend it right before or right after the call to master prep and master follow-up, which is what matters most. So I believe in your enablement assistant being more useful then versus on the call outside of, hey, let's say you don't handle the objection well, but your manager's on the call. Can you recommend it to them so that they can jump in? Because that way they'll have had a few seconds to like master it before it. So I think there's an opportunity for real-time information or enablement to answer your question. But to your point, without the deeper discovery and critical thinking skills and questioning skills, like no matter what, you're going to be in feature battles. And then it's going to be just like, oh, well, I saw that competitor launch that new feature versus like actually getting clear on like, hey, what business problem are you trying to solve in the first place? And is it one that is really worth solving? And so to answer your question, going back to how you started, I don't know exactly how we solve for this, but I think that critical thinking, which is reasoning with mathematical skills, right? Which a lot of people are going away from, and like reading and writing, listening, like being able to really critically think are the skills that I think we need to go back to really emphasizing. Now, I think AI can do a lot of things for you, but you need to be able to understand, like, does this message feel AI written or not? You need to be able to put that critical thinking lens on this and be like, hey, if I message John Barrows, is this going to feel like AI spewed this out or not? Now, one day maybe you won't need to, but in the meantime, you do, right? And so I think that's really what teams are going to need to get good at. I think technology can be used to surface and identify where those skills are at, what's missing, what gaps there are, what recommended coaching you have, et cetera. But I do think that that's going to require a different type of practice. And I know we've talked about, AI practice and AI coaching, and maybe there's an opportunity there. But I think that's going to matter a lot.
Yeah. And kind of the analogy I just thought of is like GPS, right? Is, okay, you don't need to know directions anymore. I remember my dad was like, hated GPS, right? He was all, he would look at the map beforehand. He would want to know how to get there. And I'd be like, Dad, what the fuck? Like, just put it in the address and go. But the funny thing is now, I don't know if you noticed, like with Waze, right? So I'm on Waze and all of a sudden it recommends me to take the exit. And I'm like, that's weird. And then I'll do I'll look at the routes and it'll save me like 1 minute. You know what I mean? By going 15 different lefts, rights, turns, and all the way through a neighborhood versus if I just stayed on the highway and stayed, chugging along, I'd same time, probably a minute. And critical thinking is, if I didn't know kind of driving and where things were and how traffic works and that type of stuff, I would just follow Waze and I would just go through these ridiculous things and neighborhoods and everything else. Whereas I take a step back, I'm like, thanks, Waze. I appreciate the guidance on like the most efficient way to get there, but this is actually the direction because it's less stress on me. I don't have to make as many things, that type of stuff. So it's like, without the context of driving without directions, without GPS, you know what I mean? And just jumping into a GPS, it'll get me there, but it might get me there in a very artificial way. Whereas if I understand the base of it, I can use the technology the way I want to. And I think that's the thing I'm worried about right now is we're skipping the foundation. We're skipping to the end of the results that this technology is telling us without the context or the foundational components to understand why, and therefore really relate that information to people who know what they're talking about. And I guess if you're talking about two people who don't know what they're talking about, fine, because they can kind of fake it till they make it, I guess. But when you come against an executive who has the experience, and you're one of those 22, 23, 24-year-old reps that is just using whatever the chat GPT says or the email that it's supposed to send, like you said, I can literally, I don't care how good it is right now, maybe in a year or two it'll be better, and I promise you I can tell you what's an AI written email. I promise you I can tell you what's an AI written comment on LinkedIn. And the only thing I can say is that I call it the give a shit factor of, it's the one thing that AI can't do. It can pretend to do it, but it can't genuinely give a shit. It can't genuinely care. And I think that's the ultimate piece, is that if you genuinely care, you will stand out. Authenticity still will come through. But if you don't, AI is going to take over.
I talked about that with LinkedIn. Unfortunately, the challenge is that LinkedIn doesn't reward authenticity right now. It rewards just constant posting. And so, I see the AI generated or the same, I spoke to $1 billion CRO yesterday who told me, I'm like, okay, like that content is so freaking, like, I don't enjoy going on LinkedIn anymore. And I don't enjoy posting because I have to post from the heart. I have to post things that feel real. And LinkedIn doesn't promote it, so people don't see it. And so I'm like, okay, so I'm taking a different approach. But anyway, yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think the jury's still out in terms of like what technology addresses it. I will say my perspective is that I think going back to all the noise, right? Like we use the word noise and instant gratification and stuff. And like, these are like sayings that I think are commonly accepted, but they're also rooted in science. Like if you actually go look at science in terms of like how our brains work, like cognitive load is a real thing. Like you have a computing power in your brain where it can only take in so much information at once, and cognitive load directly impacts your memory function and your ability to think critically, to retain information. And so if you're expecting your reps to take in all this information, all this noise, all these Slack messages, and then you expect them to go on that call and be able to think super critically and ask that next level of questioning that gets to the why, when they are at their 10th call of the day, they've missed 3 product updates and 10 emails, you're kidding yourself. Like, it's just like, literally, it's just not possible. And I think that's where technology has the biggest potential, or that's what I'm the most excited about, which is how can we start tearing away at cognitive load? How can we start removing this mess that we created as technologists, right? This market where like we launch all these products and all these features and you're starting to see some are dwindling away, right? But how can we start taking away this information overload so that the reps know just what they need to know? And they actually have that mental capacity to go ask the right questions. They have the capacity to think. They have the capacity to like want to learn new skills. Because part of that's part of the issue. And so, I spent a lot of time researching like basic memory function and how information gets passed and why some information gets stuck in your short-term memory versus long-term memory, because I think it's at the foundation of how people learn and absorb. And I think like right now, the biggest advantage you can have as a company is learning agility, which is how fast can your team learn basically the change that's happening. And I think that sales leaders and go-to-market leaders and enablement leaders and reps that feel like they're on this hamster wheel where it's like, we're doing more enablement, we're buying more tools, we're doing more trainings, we're doing more coaching, yet you're not seeing the results. Ask yourself, is more really the answer? Because I guarantee you it's not. You needed to be more effective, not more. Your answer to your reps, not answering, not asking the right questions on discovery, whatever it is, it's not more enablement. You need to look at their calendar and ask yourself, do they actually have the capacity to be having the right kinds of conversations? And so anyway, I've got a lot of, we could go down a few tangents here, but I do think that that's part of the issue is like going back to your driving example of the GPS. Do you have the capacity? One, do you have the context? Do you have the experience? Do you have the skills? And then in that moment, do you have the capacity to even ask yourself that question? Or are you just operating on robot mode where you're just following Waves because Waves is telling you what to do? And that feels easier than just stopping for a second, pausing and asking yourself, wait a minute, is this the best option? And I think that that's really what teams need to look at. I think that's where the right use of AI, not the use of AI today, but where I think we can go as an industry will get us, which is less information is actually more. Less training is actually more, right? And actually getting to a place where it's more focused on like, what's the right kind of coaching? What's the right kind of training? What's the right kind of practice that enables reps to show up at their best?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I think the hope is that it can take care of all the other heavy lifting so that we have the information we need to be thoughtful, to be curious, to be critical thinking with, but not having to do all the bullshit stuff that gets in the way of that, right? And that's the hope, right? The whole stat by Salesforce that, whatever 27% of our reps' time is actually spent selling and the rest is admin and those type of things. If we can actually give that time back to the reps so that they're not doing all that heavy lifting and they can have a genuine conversation with somebody based on, some information that they were presented because it was the right information for them to learn at that time. So, we'll see where it goes. I just, I hope that there's a shift back to quality over quantity, because I think we've gotten way too ahead of ourselves on this quantity game right now and across the board, society-wise, sales-wise, everything. And more is not always better, to your point.
Incentives drive behavior. Like, I think that comes with companies really looking, and, that product example I gave earlier, we were focused on quantity, not quality. And I think if you look at a lot of products out there, they've reversed that trend. And I think that, at least as a technology company, I think it starts there, but then it emulates in other teams too. And so like, how do you not do more with less, but actually do less with less? Like, how do you actually go back to the fundamentals? Like, we just hired a new head of sales. He's like, I'm just focused on the fundamentals right now. Literally, do you have the right people in the deal? Do you know how to talk to them? And do you deeply understand their problem? Otherwise, you're going to be competing in the feature wars and you're going to have more pipeline, but it's all going to be air and your close rates are going to be shit. And you're going to be asking yourself, like, keep doing more, but I'm not seeing the results. And so anyway, but I'm excited. I have a lot of optimism for where things are headed. I think it's going to be a fierce competition, a fierce market, but one that if you're really dedicated to your craft, you can rise above.
So my caveat to optimism is I am optimistic for those who are willing to put in the work.
Totally.
I am genuinely optimistic for those who are willing to put in the work and figure it out. But I am not optimistic for those who are going through the motions and want to keep doing it. And I say this all the time. You've probably heard me, my 10-60-30, right? When a rep asked, hey, John, how you train all these reps, how are we going to differentiate? And I said 10-60-30, 10% are you going to take it and run with it, 60% are going to do something different because it's easy and it makes sense, and 30% ain't going to do shit different. And now I'm being even more direct with it, saying, look, those 30% right now, they're irrelevant and they know it, right? Even the bottom 50% of that 60%, like the ones who are just getting by, right, and just kind of flying right under the radar type of thing, unfortunately, they're irrelevant and they don't know it yet. It's that, and the 10% is always going to be the 10%. Those people you just don't even have to do anything with. But it's that top end of that 60%, the ones who want to get better, the ones who are willing to put in the work, that I think the opportunities are going to be limitless for.
100%. And I think companies are recognizing it, right? I think a lot of companies cut back a lot of people, a lot of reps, and they might not be hitting the same numbers as before, but it's more comparable than you think. And I think that what that taught companies is that like, hey, if you just have really great reps, right, and that's way easier said than done, there's a path forward. And so I think that there's going to be somewhat of like a natural like self-selection out of a lot of different careers, just like you're seeing a lot of CEOs stepping down right now and transitioning out. But I do think that people, to your point, that are willing to do the work, that are willing to get creative and like have some fun doing it, are going to rise above. Yeah. And I'm rooting for those people.
So am I. I tell people I live between the world of the give a shit factor and unconscious competence. Like I can't get you to care, but man, if you do, I will literally give you everything I got to get you to that next level. So you don't have to use any of this shit anymore. But I can't get you to give a shit, and so you have to figure that out first. And that's where I'm hoping that a lot of the reps who are kind of on this journey, if you will, they figure out that give a shit factor, and it doesn't necessarily have to be about my favorite thing or whatever. It's like, just give a shit about your profession, give a shit about your career, give a shit about getting better, and willing to put in the work. And if you got that, you can learn anything. To your point, you can learn anything at any moment, but you can't learn grit, you can't learn tenacity, you can't learn the give a shit factor. So hopefully more figure it out sooner rather than later. But Mel, is always an awesome conversation. So where, with all the cool shit, we didn't even get into all the cool shit that you guys are building right now, but where can people find out more information about Spekit and all the fun shit you're doing and all the cool stuff that you got going on right now?
Definitely go to our website, check it out, spekit.com. I guarantee you it's the easiest and fastest way for you as a rep to get the information that you need to close deals, but you as a sales leader to make sure that your teams get the information they need to close their deals. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm not as active as I used to be. I plan to eventually, but I love talking about this problem. I love dreaming about the future, thinking about what the best possible rep experience looks like and how technology can be used to deliver that. So if you got some ideas and some thoughts, reach out.
Awesome. Well, Mel, thanks again so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure as always.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sean.
Absolutely. And everybody else, hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. And like I always say at all the end of all these podcasts, go out there and make somebody smile today, because no matter how bad your day went or how bad you think it's going, you make somebody smile and you know you had a good day, and the world needs a lot more of that right now. So thank you all very much, and I will see you on the other side. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. With your support and our incredible guests, we're one of the top sales podcasts out there right now, and I can't thank you enough. Now, to keep the momentum going, it would mean the world to me if you could go and leave a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform and share some of your favorite episodes with your network. Also, I am super excited to be launching my new newsletter, where I'll be sharing everything I know and everything I'm learning along the way while I'm out there selling every day just like you. Go to jbarrows.com/newsletter to sign up today. Let's all level up and make this happen together.